this week on Walking with the Savior.
I had a friend who was very fierce, and she was the first person that I verbalized it to. And I told her everything. And I had told her about every violent incident, every up and down, the infidelity, all of it. She just looked at me and she goes, "He doesn't get to be your husband anymore. Jesus is your husband now." Right after I left my second violent marriage, I felt God calling me to get married again. I disagreed strongly. It was the last thing that I wanted, or more accurately, it was the last thing that I believed was possible. But there was no denying what was requested.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Walking with the Savior podcast. I'm your host, John Kirkman. I'm here today with a special guest, Naomi Fox, Reyna. Naomi, say hello.
Hello. I am so delighted to be here. Thank you so much.
I found Naomi on Facebook, and let's just get real. Naomi's post, hit me to the core, hit me to the heart, and I was so touched by it. I reached out to her and said, "Naomi, will you come share your story with us on this podcast?" And she graciously agreed to. I thought to start this podcast out, I would ask Naomi to read that post. It's a little bit long, but it's worth it. Oh my goodness. This will give you an overview of what we're going to talk about today, and we're going to dive back into the nitty-gritty of this post. So Naomi, go ahead and read your post for us if you don't mind.
Absolutely, you bet. I have been divorced twice. Never in a bajillion years would I have imagined that would have been an accurate descriptor for me. There have been times that I very much needed it to not be true. This post started as a comment on someone's thread, and I knew it was meant to be shared as a separate post for all to see so that they may have some hope. You see, right after I left my second violent marriage, I felt God calling me to get married again. I disagreed strongly. It was the last thing that I wanted, or more accurately, it was the last thing that I believed was possible. But there was no denying what was requested. And as God does, God implied it would be, quote, soon. So I did the work. I healed with as much dedication as if God himself had asked me to, because he did. I went to therapy twice a week for 6 months. And then I went once a week for another 6 months. I grieved. I screamed. I cried a lot. I cried at home and in the car, on the treadmill at the gym, and on walks alone. I journaled and I sat with my own thoughts and got very, very honest with myself about a whole ton of stuff. I stopped telling myself untrue stories. I stopped needing to see myself as the one who was always, quote, right. I stopped judging others, but mostly I stopped judging myself so very harshly. I bravely went on date after date, healing from domestic violence and infidelity betrayal. So very difficult. But I knew I needed to. I couldn't stay in that shell of pain and anguish. So I put myself out there. I had many kinds of conversations with many kinds of men. Much of it was fun. I genuinely do enjoy people and their stories, but a lot of it was awful too. So many masks in the single scene to sort through, mine included. Always checking in with myself to see what I truly wanted, and of course correcting as necessary. Learning to be kind and honest and direct with myself and with others was like Jedi training, difficult and proved to be so worth it. But I knew I was looking for someone very specific because God had told me so. I knew this man existed because I exist. I was nearly delusional about believing that he was real, even though many people told me my standards were too high, that I'd never find him. That all of that couldn't be in one person. I wasn't looking for perfection, just someone who had 3 things. 1, loved God more than he loved himself. 2, fiercely protected my heart. And 3, that I felt that spark with. And with all the ups and downs, after 5.5 years, I found him. And he's even better than I had imagined. We've been married over 3.5 years now, and it genuinely just keeps getting better every day. He treats me like a queen, and made me want a name because Reyna means queen in Espanol. He loves and listens to God. He inspires me to be a better mother, and he supports me in being a great friend. He deeply believes in the work that I do, and yes, he fiercely protects my heart. I am so blessed by this man whose name means God has healed, and yes, he has. Do not give up. Do not fall into despair. If you want a quality marriage and a joyful life, do not relent. Become the one half of that partnership and trust that you will be magnetized to each other. What you seek is seeking you.
Wow. After reading that, I had to reach out to Naomi. And thank you so much again just for sharing that here. That was so real, so raw, so powerful.
You're welcome.
I just want to pause just for a minute on. Sorry, I'm just finding the spot here. My heart just breaks for you that you went through a violent marriage. And I just, my heart breaks for anyone that has to go through a violent marriage. My heart just aches. And I'm so happy you're in a much better place. But
Me
what
too.
would you say if a sister out there knows she's in a violent marriage? What would you say to her?
I speak both to the sister who knows that she's in a violent marriage and also the sister who is trying with every part of her to deny that she's in a violent marriage. I know that with me. I just told myself, lots of things that that he grew up really hard, that he had a lot of problems, that he's doing way better than his parents did, and that, the first couple of years of marriage are hard for everybody. And I had so many things I told myself, and that I'm a loyal person, and I really smoothed over and whitewashed a lot of things in that marriage. And so I understand that there are those that know that they're in a violent marriage and they don't know what to do. And I think that there are far more that are like, well, it's only happened a few times. Like, that doesn't mean I'm in a violent marriage. I know that because that was me. It's not like I was ever like drugged to the hospital, like totally black and blue.
Yeah.
And so I had trouble seeing myself as someone who was being physically abused. I grew up in a very non-violent home. My parents didn't even raise their voices. And so I had very little to no coping skills for conflict resolution. And so it was very shocking to me to find myself in these situations. And it helped me to begin to articulate to at least myself that I was in a violent marriage, and to be able to find support and help. I think the biggest reason why women specifically, but men are in violent marriages too.
Sure.
And there's men that are out there being physically assaulted in their marriages, and that's a whole other ball of wax.
Yeah.
But I think one of the hardest things is acknowledging that you're in it, but also acknowledging that you're not ready to leave yet, because it is very layered and it's very complicated. And so opening up to somebody and talking with them about it, it feels like they're going to say, if you don't leave, I can't love you anymore. Like, I need you to leave your marriage so I'm more comfortable. I need you to get out of this situation so that I can be okay, is how it feels when you're talking to somebody about it. Because you don't say, I'm in a violent marriage and I'm not going to leave. It feels messed up.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is that it's hard to leave.
Yeah.
Because there's reasons why you're in that marriage in the first place. And it is my hope and my prayer that you find the courage and strength within you to get safe. But I also acknowledge that it's not that simple.
There's so much wisdom in that. I'm so glad I asked that question, because you have so much wisdom that I just don't have, because I haven't been through that experience. But I thank you so much. And like I said, I just feel so awful for any sister and any man, I guess, that has to go through a violent marriage. And I pray that you get help. Who was the first person you were able to open up to?
I had a friend who was very fierce and had a lot of her own life experience. And she was the first person that I verbalized it to. And we were sitting, we had gone to the temple together, and then we went to the Cheesecake Factory afterwards. And I told her everything. Her name is Misty, and she is such a powerhouse of a woman.
Yeah, let's go, Misty. Shout out to Misty. We love you.
Sitting there over cheesecake, and I had told her about every violent incident, every up and down, the infidelity, all of it. She just looked at me and she goes, he doesn't get to be your husband anymore. Jesus is your husband now. And those words kept echoing back to me for years. And I really did turn towards the Savior as though he were to provide for me the way that a spouse would. And for protection, for being provided for, to have guidance, to have a companion, to have someone who just loved me completely. And I wasn't ready to leave when we had that conversation. I didn't know how, but God provided the way and basically picked me up and took me 400 miles away. And that's when I really was able to kind of see things clearly. And that's when I made the decision to leave after I was several hundred miles away, because I think God, in all of his wisdom, just knew. I had been praying fiercely for miracles, but I didn't realize that the miracle I was praying for was to be able to leave. I thought I was praying for a different miracle. And I let God bring me whatever it was that he needed to. But 80% of deaths in domestic violence situations happen when she's trying to leave or shortly after. And I believe that God spared me of that type of circumstance, because when I notified him that our marriage was over, it was over email, and I didn't need to even have the conversation because I didn't owe him a conversation. At that point, it wasn't safe. And I've learned I don't have to talk to people that I don't feel safe talking to.
You talked about why you're so loud with this process when we were in our pre-conversation.
Yeah.
Well, explain that to people. Why are you loud posting stuff like this that's so vulnerable and so raw? What was your explanation of that?
I believe that when we heal silently, that we prevent others from being able to hear our story. And if I had seen someone posting something like that, maybe, just maybe, I would have seen myself in it or seen some hope in it. And it might have given me the courage to step forward. I think one of the hardest things when you're in a really, really messed up situation is the shame. Shame feels like a mountain that crushes you. And shame is when we keep things in secret. But shame cannot survive when we wrap words around it and bring it into the light. And so seeing other people speak of the things that they have worked through, that they have healed from, there's different kinds of vulnerability. There's the vulnerability that's raw and messy, and it's got the good and the bad and the ugly in it. And that's beautiful. There's beauty in that. But in sharing things more broadly, I've been very careful that I don't want to injure someone else with my healing journey, but that once I have come to a place where I've healed enough to speak of it, when I'm brave enough to tell my story without telling anyone else's, that's when it's time to share. And so I share from a place of being healed. I don't deal with the ravages of post-traumatic stress disorder anymore from that marriage, because I got so much therapy. And because it's not even that I got therapy. It's not like therapy itself was it. It was that I learned truth. I aligned myself to truth, that I am a child of God, that he is a child of God, that we're all learning and growing, and that I can forgive people and give them absolutely no space in my life also.
Oh, that's tremendous. I love that last line. I can forgive people, but I give you zero space.
Can have compassion for him and have a permanent protective order.
Say that last line. I think I cut out. You cut out.
I can have compassion for him and have a permanent protective order. Both of those things can exist at the same time.
That is really good. Man, this is fire. This is fire. I want to go back to your line where was it Misty?
Yes.
Misty's like, he is not your husband anymore. Jesus is your husband. I mean, let's just drop the mic right there, people.
That's how she is.
Oh, man. Yeah. So,
and yeah.
Tell me.
The thing is I was afraid of getting divorced a second time. I got married when I was 21, and I had all the hope in the world, and it did not go well. And I struggled a lot. I had PTSD from that first marriage. In many ways, it was violent, but not nearly as violent as the second one. And I thought for sure I would rather be dead than be divorced twice. I truly thought that there could not be anything worse than that. I thought that there was no life for me I thought that I would be just a absolute pile of nothing, that I wouldn't even be able to be there for my children, that I had nothing to give the world if I had that stamp across my face of being divorced twice. And it was only because of the grace of God that I had the clarity to even see, okay, there's a way I can survive this. And I was going to go forward in life just in strict survival. I had made peace with that. And boy, was I incorrect in assessing what the future would be like. Not only did I move from survival to doing pretty good, I would absolutely say by every stretch of any measurement that I am thriving now. And that if I had any idea how good my life would be now, I wouldn't have hesitated for a moment.
And the truth, your mind was filled with lies.
Yes.
And
Yes,
and
exactly.
and you just brought life to that scripture, like the truth shall set you free. Like, this is an amazing example of that. Sometimes I've thought in the past, like, how could the truth set you free? Give me an example of this. This was such a beautiful example.
Absolutely.
You had
Yeah.
so many lies that it kept you in bondage. And if you'd clung to the lies, you'd still be in that bad spot. But because you clung to truth, Christ helped you find your way out. Wow. Man.
Absolutely. I've looked a lot at deception because, as I've said in the past, I was married to two different kinds of liars because people lie for different reasons.
Mm.
Some people lie like a 5-year-old that doesn't want to get in trouble, right? Like there's
Mhm.
almost an innocence or just a self-protection to it.
Sure.
And we go through our lives and we think, I can't tell the truth. If I tell the truth, I will get in trouble. So we just sort of get into this habit where we don't really share completely what's going on, or we don't reveal everything because we're so afraid that if we tell what's going on, then we'll get in trouble. And then there's lying because we want to control the outcome. We want to make sure that it goes the way that we want it to. That's also manipulation, and that's also people pleasing.
Mhm.
People pleasing is a form of lying
Mhm.
because it's where we say, I'm going to be so sweet that I will change your perception of me based on something that isn't actually what I really feel. And so all of us lie. Like, I know that's not a big revelation. We know we're all liars, but I don't think most people have stopped to consider how frequently that we offer deception in our interactions.
Mhm.
And because my self-deception was so damaging to me, it nearly cost me my life. I have gotten so clear that I do not lie to myself anymore. I check in with myself daily sometimes to make sure that I'm still being honest with myself in what I want and what I don't want, because most of us are very out of practice with saying yes to the things that we really want to say yes to and saying no to the things we don't really want to do. We usually have it all backwards, and that's why we're so miserable.
I want to jump in, though. Your friend dropped that mic drop and talked about, Jesus is your husband. What did that look for in your life from that conversation forward? How did you build your relationship with him and turn to him more often, or how did it change you?
I remember being in the first place that I lived in after I got out of that marriage and laying in bed at night, and my babies were in bed. They were 9 and 4 and 3 years old. And just barely out of diapers, like barely 3 years old. And laying in bed at night and being so scared, like fear in my body, and just saying out loud, I am safe, I am safe, I am safe. And praying and speaking with God as though he were there, as though he could actually make it better, and visualizing armies of angels lining my property and making it so that if somebody had ill intentions, they wouldn't even see my house. And having that faith and that reassurance that God was like, you can go to sleep now, you're safe. Just like a husband would say to a wife who is scared, you can go to sleep now, you're safe. I've got this. And it was that, and looking at the checking account and being like, how am I going to buy groceries? How am I going to pay rent? And instead of freaking out or trying to hustle harder or just do whatever I could, going to the Lord and saying, I have this problem and I need your help because I can't do this on my own. And actually listening to what he said. And he always provided, whether it was through money showing up. But we can pay for things through a lot more things than money. You can allow people to serve and to give and to provide a way. There are organizations that are set up to help people. There are creative things that you can do. We don't need to be so prideful to think, I need you to put the money in my checking account so that I can pay these bills. And that's the only way I want it to happen.
Sure.
I know that was hard for me. I wanted to appear self-sufficient. And God said, okay, that's nice, but we're going to do it differently. And allowing him to guide and lead like a wise spouse who loves me would and could. And better than that, obviously, like even if you have the best spouse ever, they're still a human. They're still figuring stuff out themselves. And but to treat it more like a partnership where I'm keenly aware that I'm interacting with the God of the universe. And yet he still sees me as somebody that he wants to partner with in co-creating my life.
And I feel so on fire with spirit right now. That was just powerful witness of Jesus Christ. It was so beautiful, so real. I just love it. And I'm so grateful that you built that dynamic relationship with God. I think it's so cool. I want to go to this phase in your journey where you get divorced and then all of a sudden you feel this strong, hey, I want you to get married.
Oh my gosh. I argued
You're like,
with God.
hello, what? Say what, God? Sorry, I'm trying to be vain here. But
no, that's exactly what happens. It was like, no, you can't ask that of me. Ask me anything else, but not this. Like
you're like, ask
that's
me
out
to
of the
walk on water. I'll do that sooner than walk.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The idea of even being on a date or in a room alone with a man
Oh,
made my body constrict. I didn't feel okay. And I remember so clearly not trusting myself. I actually ended up, my hair was about as long as it is now, so like well past my shoulders. And I cut it to my chin myself the day after the protective order hearing. And then I had it cut like a pixie cut like a month later. And then a couple months after that, I shaved my head because
wow.
I needed to release everything. I needed to not be attractive. I needed to like withdraw completely. And I needed to have it be that he hadn't touched a hair on my head. Like it was very powerful. It was like I took a staff and struck the timeline of my life and declared, I will never be that woman again. And I got exactly what I wanted out of it. That's exactly what I got out of it. And many, many things. And I'm so glad that I did that. And in the progress of it, for God to tell me, I need you to vulnerably open up to someone again and it's going to go really great. It was like, I'm a relentlessly optimistic person. It's one of my gifts and I believe it comes right from God, but my optimism was out. I had used it all up.
Yeah.
And so I remember so clearly being in therapy, sitting on that leather couch with my therapist. And he said, like, we're going to go through this process in a way and give you tools so that you can trust yourself again. We thoroughly studied the information in the book, How to Avoid Falling in Love with a Jerk. Highly, highly, highly recommend.
Never heard of that one, but
10 out of 10. If I had followed the principles in that book, I would not have gotten married to either my first or my second husband. And because I followed the principles in that book, I knew that it was right to marry my third husband. And I knew that he was a quality man. And so highly recommend that. It put some measure of trust in myself back in my hands so that I could move forward. Because if God hadn't told me this thing, I would have been like, that's fine. I'm just going to be a good mom. I'm just going to provide for my boys. Like, we'll just move ahead. Like maybe in 10 years, I'll look at dating again. But God told me there are things I need you to do that you cannot do without him. And I need you to find him and I need you to be ready.
How did you come to the point of like, okay, God, I'll trust you?
to an extent, I didn't really have another choice. I mean, we had another choice, but I knew that I have a great and powerful God. I didn't really fully give all of my will over to him until my life was gelatinous splat. And looking back, it's like, how did I get into those 2 marriages? Like, how did that happen? Like, I did a lot of self-reflection. Like, at what point should I have known? Like, so much questioning. And really, it just comes down to that God had told me, he had warned me, he had tried, but I thought that I could figure it out. I thought that I could make it work. I said, that's a nice idea. How about this? And it kind of shoved my will back on the table. And I didn't realize the cost of what I was doing. I didn't even see that I was doing it until I looked at the wreckage that my life had become, and I realized I need to do something drastically different. And in having that time with God, and the truth shall set you free, largely the truth is of course terrifying. That thing that you're afraid to say to that person, or the thing that you would be horrified if people knew about, that's the place that you need to start, because that's where you're hiding things. And when stuff is out in the light, even if it's just to yourself, when you can acknowledge it to yourself, that's when you can actually see where the power lies in being able to create the life that you're trying to create. But you cannot move forward without telling yourself the truth. And with, the carnage of everything splayed out everywhere, everything was open. It was all done. It came out. I was in a violent marriage. He kept cheating. We didn't have any money. It was everything that I was absolutely horrified that anybody could ever know was done. And so that left me with, okay, now what?
So what would you say if somebody's in a spot and they're like, they know they need to do something that is really hard and God keeps pushing them to do it?
I wish that I could give you a huge hug, whoever is in that situation. If I could say one thing to the world and people would hear it straight to their heart and understand it, it would be that it's safe to tell yourself the truth. And I think when we start telling ourselves the truth, and then if you can reach out to God and say, I don't like this truth, it feels really uncomfortable. I actually kind of hate it. I hate that this is reality. Please help me. Send me the person or the book or the idea or the situation that will help this be okay. Because most of the time, I have yet to encounter an actual problem in our first world country, in our first world living. Most of the time, the solutions to our problems are only one perspective shift away. The problem that we're having is only our perspective about the problem. And I get this from Leslie Householder. She's written several books that are phenomenal. She introduced that concept, and also Byron Katie in Loving What Is, that the problem isn't the problem. The problem is your problem with the problem, which is what Jack Sparrow says in Pirates of the Caribbean. I'm not the first to come to these conclusions, and I didn't come to them on my own by any stretch. But it's so true that the issue that is the biggest problem in your life right now, and I do not mean to make light at all of whatever somebody is going through that's listening to this, but the issue is 100% improvable if you can adjust your perspective and align to the way that God sees it. I love how Einstein says, I want to know God's thought. The rest are just details. There's a lot of truth out there. There's a lot of people that you can find that will give their perspectives. I don't care anymore. I want God's perspective on my life. And only when I insert his perspective can I actually be set free from the truth, and I can have peace, and everything gets lighter.
I want to just pause on that. God's perspective of my life. I did something with my students not too long ago. I had them write down on a piece of paper, God, what do you think about me?
Yes.
And then we went out on a soccer field. This is at high school students. And we went out on a soccer field and we spread out 30 feet apart. And I said, I just wanted you to sit here with that question. Ask God, what do you think about me? And we just, they each just sat there quietly, and I had the paper and they something to write on so that they could just dial in, what does God say to you? And for me personally, it was a super powerful experience to ask God, what is your view of me? Right. And to hear his voice say, I love you. I am so proud with what you're doing. I'm so happy. Like, it's one thing to go to church and sing, I'm a child of God. But to hear God's voice, and it's a feeling. It's hard to put words to how I hear God's voice. But when those thoughts come and they just flow on the page, it is so powerful. How did you feel it? How have you experienced that for yourself?
Yeah. I love that you took your students through that. Like, what a powerful thing to do at such a young age. And I think that that's so remarkable. For me, in some ways it came slowly, but really I came to see that when we acknowledge what's true, it will always feel better. The truth will always feel better, even if we're scared of it. But when we really kind of sink in, when it just clicks and you're like, okay, that's what's true, it feels true. You can feel the frequency of truth. It's like a vibrating resonance. And it has a specific tone to it, a specific feel, a specific, I don't know, it's like tapping into something that's always there. And so when I started to realize that, and I could discern, I swear every priesthood blessing that I got through my process of getting divorced, every single independent priesthood holder would mention blessing me with discernment, with the gift of discernment, with the spirit of discernment. Like, I was given so much discernment. And I believe a lot of how that showed up was being able to recognize truth. And when you're relentless about telling yourself the truth and you start to recognize the frequency of truth, when you have thoughts about yourself or you say something about yourself that's not true, like, oh, I'm so bad at this. Oh, wow, that's interesting. That's not true. Oh, it's a little surprising. Or, man, I suck. I'm terrible. I'm a bad person, or whatever it is, right? Like, but if you have that kind of constant measurement against everything, when it started, I would say things and I'd be like, oh, I just said something that wasn't true, but it was just me saying whatever came to mind. And I've been doing that for so many years that what I found is that when I speak truth about myself or other people or whatever, it is God's perspective, and it's filled with love and compassion and forgiveness and optimism and joy, because those are the only things that are actually real. The things that we perceive that we are, that are so flawed and so gross and disgusting and shameful, none of those things are actually real. It's like mud kicking on top of a brilliant, vibrant being of light. It will not survive. Like, when we think, oh my gosh, the worst has happened and I have broken in half and I am no longer going to be the person, I can never, ever be whole again. That's not even a little bit accurate, because your soul, your spirit, who you actually are, cannot break. It cannot be destroyed. It cannot go away. The only part that we're going to lose when we go through hell are the parts of us that are not true. Some people call it an ego death, and it hurt like hell when who you thought you were dies, but who you actually are can never, ever, ever die. If you have the label of, I'm a wife, and then you're no longer a wife, or you have the label of, I have this job description and you get fired, or if you even have the label of, I am a parent and your child dies, that's horrible. These are heartbreaking things. However, none of these labels are who we are. The only, quote, label that is true is you are a divine child of the God of this universe.
Oh man, I'm just having loving this. It reminds me, I just got to tell this. It reminds me of a clip. Maybe I'll put a link to it in the show notes, where it's a 1980s movie of Superman, and he's Clark Kent in this scene. And he's this just hunched over, a little bit awkward. He's got a suit. He's got these funky glasses. He looks kind of quirky. And he's going to go on a date, I guess, or something with Lois. Who's the girl, Lois or whatever?
Lois Lane, yeah.
Yeah. And he's all like shy. And then she walks off the scene. And then he, all of a sudden, he like puts on his Superman. And he's like, and then she comes back in and he's like, right now I'm Clark Kent. And he just kind of like hunches down. And what you just described is that, right? We are Superman. We are superheroes. We're designed for greatness. We have in us divinity. And if we act anything less, that's the Clark Kent. We put on the Clark Kent to disguise it. We think that's who we are. We say these negative things about, this is who I am. This is who I am. No, that's the Clark Kent. Underneath is the superhero that we all were born to be. Why? Because God has plans for us to do good in this world, to uplift and inspire others, and to ease the burdens of the people around us.
I love it. And what's so interesting about your analogy is if Clark Kent is there, and let's say he's completely wrapped up in this persona, like I am Clark Kent and I kind of suck and all of this.
Yeah.
He's still bulletproof. He's still infinitely powerful, right? I have a dear friend, Angela Bell, that says all the time, our worth is a set point in the universe. As powerful as we are, we cannot increase or decrease it. We are infinitely worthy. There is nothing you can do that will take away your worthiness. And there's nothing you can do to hustle really hard to make it so you're a better person and that people will like you more. That's not real. We can try, but who we are is already perfect and wonderful. You don't have to earn your worthiness. It's done. It's set.
Wow.
We just get to enjoy this beautiful experience of life and feel all of the feelings and connect and love and try to serve.
And when we feel our worth from God, everything changes.
Absolutely. Because it's the true worth. Anything else is a lie.
And I'm just feeling this. I'm on fire right now. Are you feeling it, people? By the way, I would like some listeners to reach out to me and tell me what they're thinking about this episode. You can reach me at thisisjesusinmylife@gmail.com. Do you like that email? thisisjesusinmylife@gmail.com. Reach out to me. Tell me what you're thinking about Naomi and our interview today, because I'm on fire, people. Wow. Okay, let's jump back into your story a little bit. God tells you to start dating. You go for it. And he says, and it'll be soon, but it ends up being 5.5 years. That doesn't sound very soon. In God's perspective, it's a blink of an eye. I get it, Heavenly Father. But for us mortals, when you say soon, we're not thinking 5.5 years. So tell us about your dating journey and how did you survive 5.5 years? I mean, it's got to be up and down, right?
It certainly was. And I was probably about 2 years in when I was like, okay, I am now ready to be able to show up and represent myself as available for a quality relationship. Before that, I wasn't. I was still such a mess. And I was still struggling with blame and shame and all of those layers of things, right? And about 2 years in, I was like, okay, I'm ready enough that I was like, okay, I could see this happening. And kept dating, dated some really wonderful men. I had really beautiful experiences. The first guy that I dated that told me I love that you're so emotional. I think that's a beautiful thing. It floored me. I didn't even know how to process that information because I had all these beliefs that men didn't like women who were emotional and all of this stuff. And I was able to see myself and love myself even more. Understanding about attachment theory, about secure attachment, anxious attachment, and avoidant attachment.
Yeah.
Totally incredible. Highly recommended. If you're single, if you're married, if you have anything to do with any kind of a relationship, please learn about your attachment styles because that has everything to do with how you interact with people and who you're attracted to and maybe why you're attracted to them. And it's not always coming from a healthy, grounded place. And so understanding that and just kind of following the journey in that, I also hit a really, really hard wall of some health issues. And it took 5.5 years of that. There's a theme of 5.5 year cycle in my life of from the time that I hit the wall until I got the diagnosis of what was wrong with me. And it's only been since August that I even knew what happened, is that I had been dealing with Epstein-Barr virus and chronic strep and
Wow.
and severe adrenal fatigue, almost to the point where I'd have to walk around with like a medical bracelet and receive steroid treatment for the rest of my life. And so I had very, very little energy, which caused me to need to move home with my parents so they could help take care of my kids and keep a roof over my head. And I'm so grateful for them. They're wonderful people. And they are very eager and willing to help. And also, I really didn't want to live with my parents.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that was another layer of swallowing my pride and
Wow.
learning what I needed to learn. And in following the path that God laid out for me, I was able to heal a lot of layers of my relationship with my mother. And I know that that was a big part of why I couldn't find my sweet husband yet, because if I hadn't been single, if the circumstances hadn't guided me like a river to where I was going, I wouldn't have been able to heal this very fundamental part of me and my story. And I was able to be set free again from just normal things. It wasn't even anything really arduous, but all of us have parent wounds, some big and life interrupting, and some of us are, we just kind of ignore it.
Wow.
And I thought that was a very benevolent gift that God was able to give me, to lead me to having a huge aha and click of truth. And it was just shortly after that, like a few months later, I moved across the country. I was living in Nauvoo with them and moved back to St. George, where I really wanted to be. And I met my husband 5 weeks later after I moved back.
So was there a point in your dating journey where you were really frustrated with God putting you down this journey?
I don't think that I had really gotten frustrated with God as much. There were points that I lost hope in general. When I had hit that wall, it was like a switch going off. And that was about 3 years after I had become single again. I had hit some really difficult things, nothing nearly as hard as what I'd been through, but I hit some difficult things. And in doing that, I think it was years later, looking back and doing all the healing work, I realized that I had done all that work, getting out of that marriage and healing myself and all of that. It was like climbing a huge, gigantic mountain range and being like, okay, awesome, good. And then to find that I was climbing another mountain range again of something that was really hard, I was like, nope, I'm not up for this. And in a lot of ways, I lost the will to live. I didn't have the will to die. I wasn't going to do anything about it. But it wasn't until years later, and God himself told me, by the way, what happened is that you lost the will to live. And I was able to reconnect with that and to heal that part of me. But when you lose the will to live, Epstein-Barr virus loves to move into that. And I think many, many, many people are dealing with this, where on a low grade level, they don't really want to be here. Life is hard. This world is hard and it's harsh. And it's hard to see the beauty, especially after the drudgery of, well, I dealt with this and I dealt with this and then I overcame this and then it's just more and it's a barrage and it's heavy and it's hard. And so it felt in many ways like I was clinging to the planet. Like, I have my children, I have to live, because if I die, they go back with their violent dad, and that's not okay. And so that's literally what kept me breathing, because I didn't really want to be here anymore. I had been through so much. Shortly before I had left my second husband, we had a stillbirth, and I lost 40% of my blood when I lost my son, and I died for a moment. And I am very acquainted with grief. And I'd lost a couple of other children as well, one a later miscarriage and one an early miscarriage. And unfortunately, it's part of being in a fallen world, and I have peace with that, but also grief is just part of this experience. Jesus grieved. Jesus had sadness. Those are not things that are born out of unrighteousness. They are part of being here. And as great as our grief has been, as great and greater can our joy be. They are intrinsically related, grief and joy, and they are both holy. And so going through all of that and just hitting this this point of exhaustion soul level exhaustion. I met my husband while I was still so sad in many ways. I'm a happy person. I'm optimistic. It's not fake, but I was happy and sad at the same time. I was always sad. I woke up sad my whole life. I was woken up sad. I knew that I struggled with depression on some level. And when I met my husband, he didn't try to rush in and save me or anything like that. He just was like, wow, that sounds really hard. And we had been married about 1.5 years when I realized I don't wake up sad anymore. And
Wow.
I have been healed from chronic depression. I don't struggle with it anymore. I have days that are bad, but I'm not sad anymore.
Wow.
And it's because of Jesus. And also being married to a really, really good man has helped. But he's not responsible for my happiness. He just adds to it.
That's deep. How did Jesus help you through your depression, do you think?
I know that there are many of us who walk with the Savior. And I love that that is the context that you talk about all of these conversations here on this podcast. I know that if we could see with our spiritual eyes, we would literally see Jesus walking around with certain people. And some of the people he walks around with would surprise us. And some of the people he doesn't might surprise us too. And it's not for us to judge. It's just, I think it would be humorous on some level for us to realize how prevalently that he truly is with us. And I became aware of this many years ago. And the Spirit bore very strong witness of this to me. And I've tried to cultivate that to be a vessel where Jesus could walk with me. And to also understand that when I speak the things that I do, when I share what I do, some people are going to be very drawn to me because I walk with my Savior. And some people are going to be very strongly repelled from me because I walk with my Savior. And that's okay. It has nothing to do with me.
I love it. I love it. Hey, we all love a good love story. So,
And I love our love story. And I wish so much for everyone to be so in love and so safe and so joyful in their relationships that wants to be. It's the best thing that this world has to offer.
when you went through this 5.5 year journey, when it hit you, I think this is the man that God had in mind for me.
And cool. So we met on summer solstice. It was actually the day of an eclipse. I teach astrology, and so it's just interesting
Total
to-
eclipse of the heart. Wait, sorry, I'm a horrible singer.
Yes, exactly. And so we had met on summer solstice, and we knew each other for 3 months before he proposed. And he proposed, it ended up being on fall equinox, and he didn't realize that, but it was just poetic.
You know all
And then we
these
got
days and signs. And
Oh, I'm very into days and numbers and all the things.
That's
and then we
cool.
got married on 11/11. And so we knew each other 143 days from the day we met until the day we got married. And it turns out, I didn't know this, that 143 is the number of true love. Because if you were to pick, I love you, 1 letter, 4 letters, 3
hey,
letters.
143, I love you. It's the numbers of the,
Yeah.
the I, 1, love, 4, 3, you.
And so it went very, very quickly on paper. By the calendar date, it was very quick. But the reality was that it felt good and it felt safe. And he was so patient. I think one of the ways that I knew that he was the one is he knew he loved me very quickly. And that's fine. Like, if he wants to fall in love fast, that's his business. And he told me he loves me after like 3 weeks of knowing each other,
Oh,
right?
that's a little quick.
I know. And he meant it. And I could feel that he meant it because I can discern. I can feel when people are full of crap, and I can feel when they're telling the truth after everything I've been through. And he just said it, but he didn't expect me to say it back. And, I told him, I was like, wow, that's so beautiful. Thank you. I don't feel the same way at this point. And he's like, I know. He's like, I'm not worried about it. He's like, this is what's true for me. And so I'm going to tell you. And there was no expectation. There was no strings attached. And we just kept dating. And he would tell me from time to time that he loved me. And I wasn't in a place where I could say it back. And I even got scared. I'm like, what if I can't love this man back?
Sure.
What if I break his heart?
Yeah.
And then God was like, he's a grown man. He can deal with his own broken heart. And I was like, okay, that's right. Yeah, he's a grown man. I can let him have his own thing. I didn't say I love you back for 5 weeks.
Whoa.
Not because I was withholding it, not because I was scared, not because of any of that. I just needed that amount of time, which is still fast. I mean, we're talking like 8 weeks.
Yeah.
Like, it's still very fast, but we spent a lot of time together. We did a lot of talking. In the How to Avoid Falling in Love with a Jerk, they talk about time, togetherness, and talking. You need at least 90 days. You need to talk a lot, and you need to be physically together in the same space to truly get to know someone.
Nice.
And I have such an awareness of people. It's what I do for a living. I am a social scientist. I help people understand themselves. And so I understood him and I understood myself deeply. And that accelerated our ability to understand each other. And so after I knew that I loved him, it was like a month later that we were engaged. And it was seeing how he had the patience and didn't push me whatsoever to be like, well, I'm in love with you. Are you really going to just leave me out here?
Oh, yeah.
He always respected my boundaries. He never, ever, ever once, when I said, I can't talk tonight, or I can only see you after 9:30, or I even told him after we'd been getting to know each other like a week and a half, I was like, I'm really busy with work. I need like 3 weeks. So just don't text me or call me. Like, he thought I was brushing him off. And then I realized, I don't work on Sundays. I could go to the park and walk with you on Sundays. Like, I really was trying to figure out things. And he was just so happy and eager to show up in my life in whatever space that I had. And he never, ever pressured me. And he just is so profoundly respectful and honorable. And these things that were careful, but he's also got like this fierce backbone, and he's not a pushover, even though he's really laid back. Like, all of these really unique qualities that I was like, I've never seen all this in one person before. And it was all of that reassurance. And he constantly reassures me. I need reassurance. I'm anxious attachment. I am the type of person that I need reassurance. And I believe most women do. Most women are scared a lot, even if we don't talk about it. I love how Teal Swan talks about that. If men knew how much women are physically afraid of being harmed on a regular basis, any women listening, email John and tell him, like, the fear of just walking to your car in a parking lot, even if it's in broad daylight, most women are afraid of being physically attacked on a very regular basis. And so the men who are good men need to reassure the women that you are not going to hurt us, that you are not going to impose yourself, and everything would just be so much better if men understood how vulnerable women feel, and if women were able to receive that reassurance and not be afraid of the men in their space. And so these types of things are so powerful.
I say this to my students real quick. Let me jump in. Keep your thought. But I always tell my students this, and I just want to, and sometimes my students listen to these episodes, so I just want you to know, this is my rule. Boys, your number one job on a date is make sure the girl feels safe. That's your number one job. So I hear that loud and clear from you today, Naomi, and amen. Because I've had several women talk to me about this, not feeling safe, for example, to take a jog. And I've never worried about my safety when I take a jog, except for when I grew up in LA. Okay, but I've been gone and out of that for 30 years now, and I haven't felt worried about my safety. But women often worry about their safety when they go for a jog. And I'm like, whoa, that is wild.
Absolutely.
Right? And
I live in a really, really safe area, and I would not go walking at night. In my very safe, upscale neighborhood, I would not go walking at night by myself.
Yeah.
I'll go walking at night with my husband for sure. Mm-hmm. I will not, as a woman, go walking by myself. And it blows my mind that anybody...
Take us back where you were at. I cut you off to share that.
No, you're just fine. I thought that you actually added to that really beautifully. Like, really being, as a woman, knowing that I needed safety and allowing myself to receive that, not feeling needy when I needed reassurance, telling him I need reassurance. He goes, okay, I will give you reassurance. And he means it. And he still does it all the time in every way. Reassurance emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, just to show me he is the man in my life. He's got this. He can handle it. And I don't have to receive the burden. He takes the burden and I take the burden, and together we do it. But he doesn't leave me to figure it out.
Excellent. Hey, tell us your proposal story. People dig this stuff.
It was very simple. We were just sitting there. It was after midnight and just talking about everything. And we had talked about what if we got married and all the things, and the conversations were there. And he just turned to me and he just said, "Will you marry me?" And I said yes. And then he proposed like a week later when we got a ring. He proposed again on one knee. And then again, a few weeks later, he proposed while we were walking through the park that we used to walk through all the time. And he's proposed to me since we've gotten married. He asked me again and again and again to marry him.
That's beautiful. It just warms my
Yeah.
heart. I wanted to end the story on a, like, hey, Disney princesses are real, man.
Indeed. And Disney princes are real as well. And he comes from royal blood. He grew up in Spain, and hence the Reyna for the last name.
Yeah.
And he was born with the name Raphael, which means God has healed, like I
Oh,
had mentioned in my
this just gets better and better.
yeah.
God has healed Raphael. Tell us your husband's name. I got to give this man a shout out.
He now goes by Ralph Reyna.
Ralph Reyna. Ralph, let's go, man. Let's go, man. You kill it, dude. I love you, man. You're the bro.
Yeah. He deserves all of it. Although he really hates the spotlight.
I know. He's like, why do you have to tell
he's
her my
like,
name?
"Come on, it's not about me." Yeah.
Oh, it's pretty. It's just beautiful. What a journey we've gone through today, Naomi. I feel so inspired. I feel so blessed by your wisdom today, your insight. You're so wise. And your journey has been so powerful to share and be real with us today. Dealt on some raw, rough topics, and I just feel so on fire with the Spirit. I just want to thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm really honored to be here.
What would you say if you had to say, my Jesus, this is my Jesus? Could you finish that statement for me?
My Jesus is absolute, pure truth and love and peace and joy and compassion, like multiple faces of a diamond, all creating one glorious feeling and being and energy and savior. And I wish people knew, I wish I even knew, I'm still getting to know him, just how powerful that is in our lives.
I've never been brought to tears yet, Naomi, and I just feel so much appreciation for this conversation, and just man, maybe it's just because you just put it so real, and just I heard it for you in your story when you were talking about your abuse. I felt for you when you had to get a restraining order. I felt for you when when God told you to start dating again. I just like, that had to be so hard for God.
Yeah.
But it was so right.
So right. So right.
And then I just love the Disney princess ending, if we shall call it that. Thank you so much, everybody. I did this podcast. I had no idea. Up about my first 3 or 4 interviews, I thought, okay, I could interview these people and then we'll see where this goes. I never knew I would meet Naomi and have my life so blessed by conversations like this. And so I really want to know, I'm shouting out to our listeners today. I really want to hear from you. Reach out to me. This is jesusinmylife@gmail.com. This is jesusinmylife@gmail.com. Tell me Tell me some of your thoughts and what are you feeling and experiencing through listening to these episodes. I want to thank everybody for joining this week. Thank Naomi one more time. And most of all, I want to encourage everybody to have an enjoyable walk with the Savior this week. Have a great week, everybody.